Afternoon, Mark. How are you?
I'm fine, Steve, and looking at the screen, so do you. You look very good.
I've been running around like a blue-bottomed something or other.
Blue-arsed fly.
That would be the one. And I've had a very, very busy morning. So running around and actually just getting the opportunity to sit down and grab a cup of tea and have a catch-up with you is welcome relief, my friend.
Excellent.
So anyway, what are we talking about today?
We've been talking to some length about our time in the Navy. But the Navy days came to an end. I was in just under 8 years. I'm not sure how long you were. You were a bit longer, weren't you?
Yep.
They came to an end. So just before the end, we would have had we would call the last foreign run ashore. I think we need to explain for people what a run ashore is, and then what do we mean by foreign? Because for me, I'm tempted not to include Gibraltar, which would have been the last out of the UK run ashore, but really it's part of the UK. So I'm going to go slightly further afield than that. What do you think? Can you remember? Because you can't remember much of your last run ashore on the Charybdis, supposedly. Do you remember much about your last foreign run ashore, and where was it?
It's probably a little bit different for me because my last foreign run ashore was when I was on foreign service, what they called LFS, Local Foreign Service. I was actually based out in Italy, down in Naples at the Allied Forces Southern Europe. And so that was my last foreign. When I finished there, I came back to the UK to HMS Mercury, the shore establishment in Petersfield for a very short space of time before joining HMS Southampton, which was my last ship. But she was in refit in Hebburn, not Heaven, but Hebburn in Newcastle, man. Well, I didn't know what she going on about late. So she was in refit up there, and I spent 6 months living in Hebburn, which is probably as foreign as you get, to be honest. But it was a fantastic time, and I dossed down with a wonderful old lady up there who took me under her wing because her son was ex-Navy as well, and all of this sort of stuff. She was an amazing old dear, and one of my biggest regrets is losing touch with her. So my actual last foreign was down in Naples, Italy.
But you weren't on a ship?
No, that was a foreign service. My last run ashore, I would have to say, was Gibraltar, even though you would disagree with being a foreign. Gib was my last port offshore the British Islands.
So how do you describe a run ashore? They're amazing things, really. It's a naval term, isn't it? You're not physically running, but you are ashore.
Sometimes you're physically running, Mark.
Get to the nearest pub. Or away from the nearest pub. Well, how would you describe it?
It's a mixed bag of emotions. It was, and I've got no idea what it's like now for matelots these days, sailors these days, but back in our day, you were always looking forward to your next run ashore. So there was always an expectation that when that first line got secured to the jetty and the Union flag was raised up the flagstaff on the... or the ensign, as it was in my case on one occasion, once that Union flag was raised up, you knew that it was game on, really. And then there was a whole build-up to it, wasn't there? So you'd get that run-in as you arrived at the jetty, and then you'd get that manic action going on around who was going to get ashore first. The whole mess deck would be smelling of aftershave and deodorant and talcum powder everywhere because the lads were getting ready to go ashore. It was quite a big thing, wasn't it?
Foo-foo powder was flying everywhere.
Foo dust, yeah.
I always remember when you got into a foreign port, one of the first things that used to come on was the money, because you put your money in to the ship's writer, who would then order ahead of time that we want this amount of money, and then they, or he, probably a team of them, had to count it out for each individual, and you got handed it, didn't you? We went to Djibouti a couple of times, and I don't know what it was. Either this money had been kept under the arse end of a camel for 30 years. It stank, the money. And I remember we opened it and it's like, wow. And we had to get all the underarm spray and deodorant to literally put it on the money. It reeked. And I put it in my wallet and I can remember it smelled for some months afterwards. I don't know what it was. I didn't know money could smell like that.